Only 4 days to go to get your Millionaire raffle ticket before they're gone. With 1 Millionaire guaranteed, over 5,500 cash prizes, and our best win odds ever, you can win it. Even your karate instructor can win it. Play responsibly in store, in-app, or at lottery.ie.
I'm a millionaire.
Welcome into the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, Sports Memos, Bowl Edition, with our college football expert handicapper, Robbie Vino. Rob, welcome to the pod. How are you?
I am good today, Drew. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. We're actually we got a bunch of games here. We're recording this as Duke and Temple is going on. It's in the second quarter. Temple's up 13-7. So hopefully it's December 27th, Thursday, and hopefully we get them on the right side of some of these games. Robbie, what do you say?
Yeah, no, obviously that's the intent every time we take to this podcast, Drew. So let's go ahead and do our best to produce some winners for everybody out there.
All right, let's do it. 237-238, 5:15 p.m. Eastern kick. Miami at Wisconsin. Not at Wisconsin, but Miami versus Wisconsin. This is the new stripe era Pinstripe Bowl. And it's in New York, cold weather here. Miami traveling up to the Northeast. Not a situation that I'm looking to bet, Robbie. I don't know how many players on this roster have put on shoulder pads and a helmet in under 35 degrees weather. I would take the under on 10 guys that have played a football game in this kind of weather. But 43.5 the total. What do you say, Miami, Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think the lucky thing for especially the Miami team, like you're mentioning, Drew, where weather's concerned, is that the wind won't be much of an effect. It just gets that much colder here mid-Atlantic, especially northeast. When you add wind to already cold conditions, they're looking at a little above freezing here. For Wisconsin, it'll be no big deal. For Miami, it could obviously be a deal. What has also become a deal has been the quarterback situation for the Miami Hurricanes with N'Kosi Perry. Drew, I don't know if you read the article or not. You probably did, but some kind of weird sex tape. Yeah, that they had to delete off of YouTube, and now he made the trip. Whether or not he plays at all is in question. Obviously, he's not going to be the starter here. We're back to Malik Rozier. You can kind of list these quarterbacks as 1A and 1B, sort of like an entry at a horse race, because they've been back and forth as starters all season long, and really one has not outperformed the other. I think they expected a lot out of Rozier this year. It just has not happened. So we'll see how he does today. This is kind of a redemption game for the entire Miami team, and especially for Rozier, who in his defense was without probably his best three offensive weapons in last year's bowl matchup against Wisconsin, where they just got everything handed to them. Remember, the turnover chain was becoming such a cultural thing at that point in time on sidelines across the college football landscape, and then, of course, on ESPN highlights. But the turnover chain worked the other way in that game. Alex Hornibrook had a monster bowl game last year. So for Miami, it's a chance to atone for that particular loss. Wisconsin, really, when you look at it, Drew, they're the team that enters this season in beat-up fashion. The defense has been beat up all season long. The wide receiving corps suffered through injuries and suspensions for the majority of the season. Alex Hornibrook in and out with concussions. The only mainstay for the team has been the running of Jonathan Taylor behind another good offensive line from Wisconsin. But the Miami defense has been top-notch all season long, and they come into this one with the number one rated pass defense in America right now, and also a very stout run defense. So it's going to be tough, I think, for Wisconsin to move the football, weather conditions or not. Same probably can be said for Miami, who is without Jeff Thomas, one of their top wide receivers for this one. I just feel like there's probably more holes in the Wisconsin defense than there are in the Miami defense at this point in time. So Miami probably has the edge in ability to make the difference-making play. I think quarterbacking is about equal. Hornibrook's going to play here, but even so, he hasn't been good this season. And like I say, he's been intermittently in and out of the lineup. So I think I would favor Miami in this contest. It'll be defensive-oriented. It won't be as bad as what we saw last night between Cal and TCU with 9 interceptions and nobody able to move the football. These teams can move the football a little bit. So for Miami, load the box, stop Taylor. For Wisconsin, try to cover up for what's been an injury-filled season on the defensive side of the football.
Robbie, we got another game tonight. Before we get there, I want to give out the coupon code for this podcast, CBB499. That's the rest of the college basketball season for just $499 at checkout. That's the coupon code. And you'll also get Robbie's rest of college football season with that. So for less than $500, you can get the rest of the college basketball and college football season. That's more than $300 worth of savings at sportsmemo.com. CBB $499 at checkout for the rest of his college basketball season. We'll also throw in college football season with that. We got 239-240 tonight. Robbie, Vanderbilt, Baylor, 3.5 or 4. That's what the Commodores are laying. 56 the total. This one in NRG Stadium in Houston, Texas.
Yeah, good battle, good quarterback battle here, I think, Drew. You got a couple of guys that can really throw the football. I'm a fan of Charlie Brewer for Baylor, and that being said, Kyle Shermer has really thrown the football well for Vanderbilt this year. Vanderbilt's been a better offensive team than they've been in the past. It's been necessary because the defense hasn't really come through an awful lot for them as far as holding other teams from scoring. Their last 3 games, their last 4 games, they put up 45, 28, 36, and 38. So you can see the direction that the offense is headed. A little different than what Derek Mason is accustomed to. He's a defensive-minded head coach, but the offense under Andy Ludwig has been carrying the weight for them. I think, motivationally, both teams absolutely want to be in this game. What Matt Rule has gone through in his second year now at Baylor to try and grassroots this program back to lofty heights in the Big 12. I think, when you culminate with a bowl game, your very first bowl game, it's very meaningful. And the same for Vanderbilt. Anytime they make the postseason, it's meaningful. So expect big efforts out of both of these teams. You won't have to worry about getting 60 minutes worth of effort out of either one of these sides. Question is there a defense here, one particularly better than the other? And it's hard to gauge, Drew, because they come from such different stylistic conferences. Baylor obviously caught up in that Big 12 where points abound, and Vanderbilt, of course, in a league where, even though they're in the East Division, outside their division this year, they did draw Mississippi, which almost acts as a Big 12 school offensively. And also from the west side, they drew Arkansas. So they drew basically the 2 worst teams you could have from the western side this year. Didn't get any of the top-notch teams. They dealt with whatever they had to deal with in the East. I think, specifically getting down to what makes a difference in this game fundamentally, one side against the other, it's probably the passing attack of each side against the pass defenses. Like I opened with, the pass defenses have not been great, and they could be a little better tonight, Drew, because the run defenses don't necessarily stop opponents either. When you can present balanced offense, it helps your strength out even more. I think that works both ways here. Vandy more apt to run the football if you just look at their play calling percentages so far this season. Probably more balanced than they've been in a long time, but still slightly run heavy, 52-48 in that direction. So if they get any kind of running game established here against a weak Baylor run defense, expect them to be able to throw it even better, and the same goes for Baylor. Looking at a total that's been slightly pushed up here today, this total just sat at the number of 55 or 55.5 for a long time. We've seen a little bit of a push to 56, 56.5. As far as side is concerned, I think that, I'd probably look toward the underdog side here. I just don't think that I'd be willing to give points from either team here in this game. I think it's that evenly matched. So if I were to play side, I'd probably be playing Baylor plus the 4.
Robbie, that's a nice find by you. The SEC being, kind of not exactly even as far as schedule goes, and Vanderbilt being on the east side and playing Arkansas and Mississippi, that's virtually the easiest schedule you can have in the SEC. So,
that is
right. So going against a Big 12 team, there might not be that big of a schedule difference. So in not even going by the analytics, how much are you factoring that in as far as betting aside?
Yeah, no, it has to be factored in. There's no doubt about it, because Arkansas and Mississippi just don't present any defensive resistance And it is, like I say, very comparable to a Big 12 school. So I think that favors Baylor, and it probably allows you, Drew, to take the Vanderbilt numbers, like you're saying, from an analytics side. You're able to take and scale Vanderbilt's numbers in those games to and equate it to a Big 12 team. So I think it makes it a little bit more on par there and a little bit easier to handicap. That's probably why I like the dog here. Vandy didn't show a heck of a lot against really good defensive teams. Against the poor ones, they did move the football real well. So we'll see how this one goes. Two excited teams, two teams that I think will present balanced offense in that game.
All right, Robbie, moving on to the Friday slate, 241, 242. We got Auburn versus Purdue. This one, we got the War Eagles laying 3, 55 the total. I believe this is the Liberty Bowl in Memphis, Tennessee. And I'll tell you, Robbie, I don't know if I'm thinking with my head or my heart. I'm an Auburn graduate, but I think Auburn rolls in this one, man. How do you feel? And I'm pumping the brakes because I usually don't bet Auburn, but interesting to hear your take.
Yeah. All right. First, we'll just clarify the Tennessee city for this one. Music City Bowl in Nashville.
Nashville. Okay, thanks.
Two Tennessee venues over the course of the next 3 days. And usually, Drew, we do have to worry about weather conditions in these two Tennessee bowl games, but not the case here for this one. Everything looks good weather-wise. Purdue versus Auburn, we're looking at 60-degree temperatures. No rain or no percentage chance of rain here, 0 to 5%, and slight winds, maybe 10 miles per hour. So that's real good news for the Purdue team, especially, which loves to go ahead and throw downfield and look to make home run style plays. Jeff Brom made that change. I think if we go all the way back to Game 3 of the season when they played Missouri, and after the first two games, you're thinking, man, and Jeff Brom admitted it. Preseason and into the beginning of the season, we just have to find creative ways to move the football because this team hasn't grasped the system I brought here from Western Kentucky. Well, his philosophical switch was to go downfield, and that really paid off against Mizzou. It paid off the rest of the season, and what also paid off was, having Rondale Moore on your team doesn't hurt at all. The freshman star wide receiver / running back / slot back, wherever you want to put him, he's been dangerous all year long. There's a couple of things to go through here with coaching changes or non-coaching changes, right? Jeff Brom had a real opportunity to go back to Louisville, take that head coaching job, didn't accept it. Boy, was Purdue happy. The school itself, the personnel on the team, everybody real happy with the fact that Jeff Brom has stayed. I think at that point, that elevated their emotional level for this contest to as high as it could possibly be. So we know we're going to get a motivated Purdue team with Jeff Brom firmly committed to bringing this program up the ranks in the Big Ten. The other side of the coin, Auburn loses their offensive coordinator, Chip Lindsey, and of course you following the program so closely, Drew, that there's just a ton of blame thrown around this year, whether it be thrown at Jarrett Stidham, whether it be thrown at Gus Malzahn, whether it be thrown at Chip Lindsey, who's now out the door. The fan base just didn't like what they saw out of the offense, and rightfully so. But Lindsey goes, Malzahn takes over as play caller and offensive coordinator for this game, and from everything we read, there's a whole new tone being set through these practice sessions for this particular game. Players have said that, especially on the offensive side of the football where Malzahn has taken on the double duty, they've said he's been more assertive, more direct than Lindsey was. A lot of players remember or are still on the team from a couple of years ago when Malzahn was, in fact, the game day play caller, kind of reverting back to that now. And he's come with extra demands placed upon this game. Most player quotes I read from offense like it. We'll see how that works. From the motivational angle here, both of these teams sold out their ticket allotment almost immediately. Purdue's tickets gone, Auburn's tickets gone, so you're going to get a good showing. In fact, the people in charge of the Music City Bowl were really thrilled with the amount. I think I saw today, Drew, in excess of 50,000 in attendance for this game will be, or at least tickets sold for this contest. So they thought that exceeded what they had set as expectations for attendance in this game. Really, really good on both sides. I think that makes for a top-notch effort out of both sides here. Purdue goes 1-0 under Brom in bowl games. They win last year 38-35. And, of course, Auburn wants to make up for the UCF debacle. Real quick, fundamentally in this game, you got some things to look at, and I'll give you one key number in this contest in a minute. But for Purdue, it's David Blau throwing the football. It's Rondale Moore getting the football in zillions of different situations. But I think one other guy to look at here, Isaac Zico, the other wide receiver for Purdue, is not heralded, doesn't get a lot of press. He scores a touchdown every 7 catches this year, 42 catches, 7 touchdowns, 16.6 yards per catch. Auburn's defense, 58th against the pass, Drew, so that could be a little bit of a problem. I'm sure Jeff Brom is going to bring the bag of tricks, and he's going to want to attack that Auburn defense. I think the problem you have with all those numbers is the fact that Purdue just hasn't played great defenses this season. I went through it, and all I could find was Iowa ranked 7th and Michigan State ranked 14th, and even there you get opposite results. Purdue really played well offensively against Iowa. They gained 434 total yards. That's the most Iowa gave up all season long. Against Michigan State, though, they didn't do a thing offensively. So be interesting to see what they do against this Auburn defense overall. And for the Auburn side, we'll see if Gus Malzahn leans on his preferred run-oriented spread-type offense. If they try and run it, they haven't been able to do it all season long. But here's the number I really want to get out there. Auburn faced 6 defenses this year that are in the nation's top 38. They faced A&M. These are run defenses now, not overall defenses, but 6 of the top 38 run defenses. Texas A&M was number 2, Mississippi State number 10, Washington in a non-conference tilt number 16, Alabama number 19, Georgia number 28, and LSU number 38. In those 6 games, Auburn only averaged 103 rushing yards, but it's hard to run against those 6 teams. And they didn't do well, 3.3 per carry, couldn't throw the football because they couldn't run it. But if you look at their other 6 games where they played teams that were average to poor against the run, Auburn went crazy, ran for 240 rushing yards per game. That's a 137-yard increase. The 3.3 went up to 5.3. Purdue has the number 103 defense overall and 66th against the run. So, Purdue falls somewhere in between Auburn's 6 lousy opponents and Auburn's 6 really, really good defensive opponents. We'll have to see exactly where they fall. But I think, like you said earlier, Auburn can do some damage here because the intensity that Malzahn has placed on these practices and the expectation he's placed on winning this football game, it's not like last year where they walked in kind of flat. I think they're going to be ready, as will Purdue. Good matchup. Purdue, something to keep in note for those of you that follow technical trends. How about 8-2 against the spread as an underdog under Jeff Brom right now? So Purdue certainly thrives in that role.
Great breakdown there, Robbie, for Auburn, Purdue. And, guys, we're going to try to make it through the whole card here. So bear with us. Got some good information. Robbie's obviously bringing it here. And remember the coupon code, check it out for the rest of this college basketball and college football season, CBB499 at checkout at sportsmemo.com for his college basketball season. We'll throw in the rest of his college football season on the house. Robbie, next game up, we got Syracuse, West Virginia. Looks like Syracuse now laying 1.5 or 2. 66 the total. Will Greer not playing, I believe. That should have something to do with this total move from 74 all the way down to 65.5 or 66. What's your view on the orange versus the Mountaineers?
Yeah, and it's funny, Drew, as we get closer to these games, these absences from teams and key absences just keep occurring day by day. So we are podcasting here the remainder of the schedule, and we're 5-6 days out from some of these games. So if stuff happens in between, don't fault us for it. We're giving you what we know right now. But in this game, just recently, within the last couple of days, Syracuse loses key personnel to their team as well. So let's go through this real quick. Camping World Bowl in Orlando, Florida. Drew, you know the territory. You know that every single day there's a thunderstorm in Florida. So the fact that there's 25% to 40% chance of scattered thunderstorms for this game, I don't know that we could even place that into the handicap unless it downpours at a certain point in the game where they have to, clear the field. But you have to deal with that in any bowl game in Florida. It's not going to be a continuous rain from what we see here. These percentages go up and down throughout game time, as low as 25, as high as 40. So you might get a sporadic shower, but I don't think it's much to worry about here. 75-degree weather, 7 to 9 mile per hour winds, real good playing conditions on this field in Orlando. Coaching changes real quick. For West Virginia offensive coordinator Jake Spavital gone, takes the Texas State head coaching job. He'll replace Everett Withers down there for the Bobcats. He took that job back on November 28th, so Dana Holgorsen has had plenty of time to reassert himself as the offensive coordinator, game day play caller. He's done it before, Drew. He's really good at it. And I'll tell you, in an article I read, defensive coordinator Tony Gibson was very vocal in how much he liked the fact that Dana Holgorsen is going to be the game day play caller here. And OC, he claimed, and there's probably a ton of truth involved in this quote, and I'm not going to give the exact quote. I'm going to give the gist of the quote here. He said that the difference between an offensive coordinator and a head coach acting as a game day play caller is that the offensive coordinator, and I don't know if he's referring to Spavital directly, but it's probably just a general comment for all OCs. Their job is to put points on the board. They don't worry about the defense. They don't worry about us getting any rest. He said that when Dana Holgorsen in the past has called plays and been offensive coordinator, that he calls the game with the entire game in mind. If he thinks he needs to run the football to give the defense a rest, he'll do that. If he needs to hit the gas pedal because he thinks the defense is on his heels, he'll do that. So as far as the rhythm is concerned, Tony Gibson's in favor of Holgorsen calling the plays here. Like I say, he's a guy who's done it before. I don't see any problem with that switch here in this game. Motivationally, you have to give an edge to Syracuse here, Drew. I couldn't find any real reason why West Virginia would be overly excited to be in this particular bowl game. They had high hopes of winning that Big 12. Here they are on the 28th of November in the Camping World Bowl. They'll come to play, but I think Syracuse has the motivational edge in this. The one thing you could say, this entire state of Florida, and especially Central Florida, where this game is going to be played, is key recruiting ground for Holgorsen and for Dino Babers, who recruits from Florida. So you got a game where they both want to put their best foot forward. Fundamentally here, you talked about it earlier, Will Grier, also starting left tackle Yandi Cajuste for West Virginia, both decided that NFL prep was more important than playing this game. So you're going to get sophomore Jack Allison at quarterback for West Virginia. And Jack Allison is a guy who transferred from Miami of Florida and only threw 10 passes all season long. I'll tell you why I give Jack Allison, and obviously he's not Will Grier, but I'll tell you why I give him half a chance in this contest to be successful and, to keep West Virginia's, label as a really good throwing team going in this contest. And that reason would be the suspensions that just happened to the Syracuse defense. They're going to lose their top defensive end here, Alton Robinson. But how about these numbers? Robinson led the team not only in sacks, but he led the team in tackles for loss. He led the team in forced fumbles. He led the team in quarterback hits. All those categories now have to be replaced by a backup. Syracuse's only asset on the defensive side of the ball is their ability to rush the passer. And they, I think, sit number 9 in the nation with over 3 sacks per game. Without their best pass rusher, that could be difficult here. So, excuse me, Drew, I'm struggling through this.
Yeah, right.
As we go through this, as they go through this, when you take your top defensive asset and you can't rush the passer anymore against the West Virginia pass offense, I think that's troublesome for Syracuse. And I know you hinted in the beginning of this that the totals come way down, which it has based upon the quarterback situation for West Virginia. So what I would take into consideration here is that Syracuse, number 9 in the nation at sacking the quarterback, they lose their top pass rusher for this contest, and starting defensive tackle McKinley Williams out as well. Now, he's got a pretty capable backup in Josh Black, but still Syracuse will be hamstrung a little bit as far as depth is concerned on this defensive line. And I think what everybody should know here is that Syracuse, despite the fact that they have the 9th best pass rush, numbers-wise, sacks-wise, in the nation, their pass defense ranks 111th in the country, Drew. Those numbers just don't add up. If you're getting to the passer as often as Syracuse is getting and sacking the quarterback, and your pass defense is still 111 in the country, there's a problem there. And if Jack Allison has any time whatsoever or any extra time whatsoever to throw the football in this game because of the personnel absences across the Syracuse DL, then they're going to do some damage, because these wide receivers for West Virginia are going to be running free against the Syracuse secondary if there's no pass rush. Gary Jennings Jr., David Sills, Marcus Sims, we all know the names. We see them every week. So I think big advantage for West Virginia that Syracuse has suspended the 2 guys that they've suspended, taking away the top asset on defense. But I think the other side of the coin is West Virginia, which goes through that Big 12 schedule, has had a miserable time with dual threat quarterbacks this year. The Big 12 wasn't loaded with really good dual threat quarterbacks this season, but they had 2 of them. Kyler Murray, everybody knows. Sam Ehlinger for Texas was real good as well. And both of those guys lit up the West Virginia defense. I can only imagine what Eric Dungy could do. I see a couple of player quotes or beat writer projections for the game, which will very generally tell you West Virginia's used to dual threat quarterbacks. And being used to it's great, but if they're tearing you up, who cares if you're used to it or not? I think Syracuse will probably tear up the West Virginia defense here as well. A couple of point spread numbers to point out real quick here, Drew. Syracuse closed the season 4-1 against the spread in their final 5 games. West Virginia 3-1-1. 2 teams that were really hot down the stretch. And West Virginia went over the total in their last 5 games straight. So they've been on a pretty good roll where they score and they allow, which is typical of a Big 12 team. A little bit, I don't know, a little bit not concerned, but I just don't believe, a little head scratching to me, I guess I would say, that the total has come down almost 9 points now. I think you said there's a 65.5 out there at this point in time. That would be 8.5 points off the opener. To me, that's a little too low. Could be time for buyback.
Robbie, we got the later game, the Alamo Bowl, Friday night. Iowa State, Washington State, Big 12, Pac-12 matchup here. This is the in the Alamo Dome in San Antonio, Texas, 9 p.m. Eastern kick. Looks like the line was moving a little bit earlier, but looks like it's 56 or 57, anywhere in between there. Actually seeing 55.5 as well to 57. So some opinion on this total, 2.5 to 3. Washington State laying in this one. How do you look to bet the Cyclones and Cougars?
Yeah, it almost shapes up for Washington State exactly the way it did last year. They lost the Apple Cup to Washington last season, which prevented Washington State from winning that side of the Pac-12. Then they went to a bowl game and got destroyed. There were injury concerns in that game for Washington State, so we have to be fair to them. But this year, they head into the Apple Cup against Washington. Again, opportunity to win the north side of the Pac-12 and go to the Pac-12 championship. Washington wins in that snow-filled game. And here's Washington State again, stuck, in the Alamo Bowl. Last year was kind of a no-show. Will they show up this year? I'm not sure. I don't know that that's last year's result is something that you can attribute to the head coach Mike Leach and say, well, he can't get his players up in a situation like this. I don't know if that's fair to say, but it may very well be repeated here, Drew, because Iowa State's going to come in extremely motivated to play. Matt Campbell, one of the hottest names in coaching right now, and he's done wonders with this team, who themselves went through injuries, especially at the quarterback position this year, where they got all the way down to number 3, Brock Purdy, and Brock Purdy stepped in and just lit it up offensively for Iowa State. We know with David Montgomery running the football, they're a well-balanced offensive team. Washington State's been very good defensively. If you just took the fundamentals of this game, they'd probably come out of the wash as a very interesting kind of a 3-point match, like we're seeing the point spread listed right now. However, you do have to put the situational angle in there, and I don't know how you handicap that, Drew. I really don't. I'm not willing to say that a Mike Leach team is going to come in here off the same situation that they were in last year and just lay down and lose this contest to a more motivated Iowa State team. But I'm not willing to say that that's not going to be the case either. So you're stuck here in this one. What I will say is that Gardner Minshew, as the leader of that Washington State offense, if I had to make a choice, I would lean toward Washington State coming to play here and trying to atone for what happened last year. If that's the case, it's an extremely pass-heavy team against the defense that's got a sensational defensive front seven that'll get after Minshew here. I'm sure that Iowa State, in their practices and in their minds, they probably feel a little bit slighted or less talked about than Minshew and the Washington State offense. And I always like that chip on the shoulder mentality from an opponent. So I think that Iowa State will make life rough on Washington State here. It's a very physical team, Iowa State. You're not going to get run over by Washington State. So, if I had to right now, I think I would choose the underdog side in this game. Iowa State, they've got plenty of offense. They've had enough of a layoff to get healthy, because down the stretch the defense didn't perform the way it did in the beginning of the season. I think all that gets settled here with a few weeks off and some practice sessions. So for me, it would probably be Iowa State plus the points, but I would still fear Leach coming to play here in that Washington State passing game, which can be devastating, showing Iowa State something that generally they see in the Big 12, but I don't know that they see a pass offense to this extent inside the Big 12.
Right, we've got a bunch of Saturday games here, I believe 5, December 29th, starting off with Arkansas State, Nevada, 245, 246. We got the Sun Belt versus the Mountain West. Pick'em game here, flip favorite, however you want to look at it. We're seeing some shops Arkansas State favored by 1, some shops Nevada favored by 1, some at Pick'em. 55.5 the total. How would you look to bet Arkansas State, Nevada?
Yeah, my power ratings made it Pick'em, Drew, so I'm right in the vicinity with where the line sits now and where it opened. We will go through these last bunch a little bit quicker here now, and I'll try and just give the biggest, what I see as the key factor as of today in this game. And for me, the transfer of McLean Mannix, the top wide receiver for Nevada, back home to a Texas school. I think he's going back to play for Texas Tech next year. I think that's huge. Nevada leaned on McLean Mannix, who, for those who don't know, not only is a top receiver, but he was the Texas, I believe, 200-meter high school champion. The kid had speed to burn, took the top off of defenses, allowed head coach Jay Norvell's offense to be run-oriented and then play action over the top. It just takes a huge piece of Nevada's offense away, which I think Arkansas State can benefit from here. We talked about Arkansas State on this podcast enough this year, Drew. Justice Hansen and the offense struggled early. They found themselves late. They've got a lot of returning talent. They had enough talent to win the Sun Belt this year, which they didn't, but certainly on paper, their talent level was as good as any in that league. Warren Wand at running back and the entire group. I think they're probably in good shape defensively because of the Mannix transfer. I just don't know if they'll hold up on the defensive side of the football, because Nevada has taken a new persona this year of physicality, and they like to run it and pound it at you with that offensive line. I don't know that Arkansas State can stand up to that. So it's really a battle of conflicting arguments here for me. Haven't made a final choice on this game. For me, I think one thing for guys playing totals out there, Nevada's taken a little bit of a different turn where totals are concerned, and you generally have to look at them now as a team that likes to use clock more than run an excessive amount of plays. So their game totals have come down a little bit as far as final scores are concerned, not as far as the odds makers are concerned. I find Nevada to be priced in the same totals range all year long, but the results have come down as far as points produced. So maybe we'll look at under in this game as well.
Robbie, next game up, we got, let's see here, Florida, Michigan. 50 the total. Looks like the Wolverines 5.5 or 6 the favorite.
Yeah, no team has had more players just abandon their bowl game than Michigan has. And I mean key players. For Michigan, this is going to be – and I know it's a stacked team full of top-notch recruits, but, Rashawn Gary, their best defensive tackle, Devin Bush, the Big Ten Player of the Year, Michigan's best linebacker, but obviously if you're the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, you're even more special. And then running back Karan Higdon, who was Michigan's team MVP this year. All three of these guys out. They had a fourth leave yesterday. Again, I understand the plug or, next man up mentality when you're dealing with these elite blue chip universities and programs, but I don't know that you just slip guys in for one game at the end of the season and make up for the production that's going to be lost with these three guys. Dan Mullen, first year, gets Florida right back into a big-time bowl game indoors here in Atlanta. Michigan travels well, but Florida will certainly be the team, in my estimation, that'll have a bigger representation in this game because of the proximity to the university. So you get a lot of fanfare. You get a highly motivated team. I don't know that there is a better motivator than Dan Mullen out there as a head coach. It's for them, it'll probably come down to quarterback play. And as long as Florida's not sloppy with the football, they may be able to cover this number and, possibly even further, maybe win this game straight up. The Michigan defections here for NFL draft prep, to me, just seem to be getting to that point where they're too much to overcome. And the number has come down accordingly, Drew. We were looking at 7s just a couple of days ago, I think, and now, like you say, 5.5, 6 the number. So some Florida money starting to trickle in here.
Robbie, next up, the Belk Bowl. We got South Carolina versus Virginia. This one on ABC 12 noon kick, Saturday, December 29th in Charlotte. Looks like the Gamecocks, 5.5, 53.5 the total.
Kind of disappointed that Deebo Samuel, another player who chose NFL draft prep over playing in this contest, kind of disappointed, like I say, that he's not going to be involved because I really, toward the end of the year, Drew, and then made a little more money on it in the Clemson game. I really, really liked South Carolina's offense at the end of the year, and I would love their offense here in this game with all the pieces on the field. But obviously, the biggest wide receiver piece, Samuel, won't be involved. So how much that sets them back, I'm not sure. But Jake Bentley made reference to it before the Clemson game. I think they had a bye week before they played Clemson, and I remember reading the Bentley quote where he said, during the off week, we worked on some stuff, didn't really care how good Clemson's defense was. He said, we're going to bring it offensively. And on that day, they brought it offensively against that Clemson defense like very few others have been able to bring it this year. I think they'll bring it again. I just wish Samuel was part of this because to have the 100% of the pieces on the field I think would have been even better. But I'll probably look, Drew, to play this game over the total because that being said, as much as I like the current state of the South Carolina offense, you can't really like the current state of the South Carolina defense. And I know Will Muschamp has had time to prepare, and last year he got them fired up enough to play good in their bowl game, really good. But against Bryce Perkins and a Virginia team which hadn't seen a bowl game until this year under Bronco Mendenhall, right? This is the first time they're going to go. So they're going to be extremely motivated. And their offense is diverse as well and capable of putting up points. This is a game where it would have been a no-brainer for me with Deebo Samuel on the field to play over. I think I would have run to that immediately. Probably would have been one of my first plays. But without Samuel, it's taken me a little more, in-depth into the game. And may still get there, we'll see. But that's the way I view that contest.
Robbie, next game up, it's a semifinal game. Oklahoma, Alabama. It's the Orange Bowl in Miami Gardens here. 76 the total. Looks like the Crimson Tide laying 14.
Yeah, and of course, all the talk is about Tua Tagovailoa and will he play at quarterback. I think we're hearing reports almost hourly, Drew, on his injury status after the surgery, but I think the latest is maybe 80% by game time with the ankle. He's determined to play. I think he will play. He's a big key. But, the suspensions of 2 offensive linemen hurt just as bad for Alabama. And again, just like we just said about Michigan, it's fully understood that, there's guys, second team, third team, that can step in. But when you start getting cluster removals from a certain position group on the field, it does, take its toll a little bit. Now, it might not be the same for Alabama as if they were playing Clemson and their defensive front. Obviously, you're playing Oklahoma, who has been, just run roughshod over all season long by any opponent who took the field against them. But still, that's stuff to worry about for Bama. I think the easiest way to look at this game, the simplest handicap, and I can't find anything wrong with this argument, is Alabama will have their way offensively. Jerry Jeudy and that wide receiving core should go wild against Oklahoma's secondary, which, it's funny, Drew, I saw a quick, maybe 5-minute breakdown of Oklahoma pass coverage this season. Various games, various big plays that they allowed, and the whole concept of this little short thing that I saw was the lack of communication in the Oklahoma secondary, and that it's led to guys running free all over the place. And if that happens against Alabama, it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. Jalen Hurts proved in that championship game, the SEC championship game, that he'll find open receivers for touchdowns too. So Oklahoma's going to have their hands full with the Alabama offense. Alabama defensively is going to have their hands full with Kyler Murray and company. It really resembles what happened last year between Oklahoma and Georgia, 51-48. I mean, Oklahoma came out and hit Georgia with a haymaker. They had no clue how to defend the Sooners until probably, from 4 minutes in the third quarter on, they got better at it. But for 2.5 quarters, they were on their heels as good as they are. Could see the same thing happening here to Alabama. I don't know that any prep time is enough prep time, whether you're Nick Saban or any head coach, to get ready for or to simulate a team offense like this. And Lincoln Riley, of course, will throw a few more wrinkles in. But, for him, Drew, he's not going to find any defensive answers between the start of practice and the start of that game. So I think over obviously looks like a real easy knee-jerk reaction play. It's a huge number, but Oklahoma's made those huge numbers look small totals-wise all season long.
Next game up, Robbie, 255-256, the Cotton Bowl, the other semifinal game, Notre Dame versus Clemson, 56.5 the total. Looks like Clemson laying 13 at Chris, 12.5 almost everywhere else.
Yeah, so we sit and wait on Dexter Lawrence's drug test to come back, right? We'll see if it was a false positive or not. But for them, I mean, when you have 4 guys, and I looked at a mock draft last night, as up-to-date as you can get, and all 4 of these kids are projected to go in the first round still. So to lose one, is it that big of a deal? Probably not. It's not like it's one standout lineman and he's not going to play, and what are we going to do now? You still have Wilkins and Farrell and these guys running around on defense, so they'll probably be okay. But Notre Dame's going to be happy if Dexter Lawrence doesn't play, that's for sure. Their offensive line has been tremendous this year. Biggest switch maybe by any coach all season long. Talked about how good the philosophical change made on offense by Jeff Brom was this season to help his team. The insertion of Ian Book certainly was a huge move by Brian Kelly. True dual threat quarterback. I know dual threat gets thrown around a lot, but Ian Book, a guy who can bring the quarterback run and the accurate passing of the football, he does bring it to the table, and that'll be something for Clemson. I just talked a couple seconds ago about how South Carolina took the Clemson defense to task. Maybe Book and Notre Dame can do the same. They're diverse enough. They've got enough wide receivers, Drew, in that wide receiving core to be considered as multiple threats. It's not like they have one wide receiver that they're going to pick out. There's 3-4 guys running around out there, and guys with size for Notre Dame that can make plays for this offense. I think, to sum this up quickly, that the Notre Dame team is being underrated here. I think that Brian Kelly said it best way back early in the season when he said, I love my defense. And for the last, I'm going to say 5 to 6 years, recent memory, the problem with Notre Dame has been depleted secondaries, injuries to the defensive front seven, whatever. It was different each year. Mostly the secondary for a couple, 2 to 3 years was really a problem. But now those issues have been solved. And it's a pretty stout defense. They don't give up a lot. And I don't know that Clemson's going to find it as easy to move the football as some people think they're going to find it in this particular contest. Trevor Lawrence is fantastic. Travis Etienne at running back, fantastic. The offensive line, of course, veteran and really, really good. But we're talking about 13 points here, 12.5, 13 points. And to me, Notre Dame certainly can slide in under that number. So I may look to be on the Fighting Irish side in that game.
Robbie, we've got Virginia Tech, Cincinnati leading us off on Monday, 257, 258, 53.5 the total. Looks like Cincy laying 5.5.
Well, how about the motivational end for this game, Drew? And I'll throw this at you because we know Luke Fickell did wonders with Cincinnati in a very, very short period of time, to the point where, in my mind, knowing what I know about what they've done in the recruiting area the last couple of years, in my mind, this is the team that immediately starting next year goes right to the forefront and pushes UCF for supremacy inside that conference. These two are going to become probably rivals at the top of that league. Luke Fickell's done that good of a job bringing in talent. Cincinnati's offense underrated, and it starts again with a dual threat quarterback here, so they can run the football, and they prefer to run the football, but they will throw over the top of you, and you do have to consider the quarterback run. It's a lot for Virginia Tech, which brings to this game, and they've had it, maybe the last 7 games of the year, 8 games of the year, an extremely young defense, especially in the secondary. They've had their issues all year long. It's been a real tough year defensively for this Virginia Tech team, and they had to sweat it out and win out right to the end of the year just to get to this place. Do I think they'll be motivated? Yes. Do I think Bud Foster, with extra time to help his defense, is a good thing? Yes, but whether or not they can match up against Cincinnati, I'm not so sure. I think a motivated Cincinnati team is more physical. It's more veteran. They've certainly got a defensive edge in this game that's as big as as I could find in these, 41 bowl games. I think the disparity between defenses in this particular game is the biggest one I found. Cincinnati's that much better. It seems strange to look at Cincinnati and be so willing to lay points off of just because the first thing that comes to mind with Cincinnati is not, I want to bet them as a favorite. But this year they're a different team, and Virginia Tech's a different team as well. I don't know that Justin Fuente and Bud Foster can put enough together here. They did a great job down the stretch just to get this team in. And to give them credit, let's give Virginia Tech a little credit here, because they put up 34 in their second-to-last game against a real good Virginia defense. And then they followed it up by putting 41 on Marshall, which was one of Conference USA's best defenses, if not the best. So they did perform well offensively to end the season. But to me, it's the defense that bothers me, and I'd probably look towards Cincinnati.
We got 259, 260 up next. The Sun Bowl, 2 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Pittsburgh, Stanford, 52 the total. Stanford laying anywhere from 4.5 at Chris to 5.5 at Heritage.
Yeah, real easy to handicap from the Stanford defense side, Drew, because all Pittsburgh does is run. Kenny Pickett, the quarterback for Pittsburgh, there was a point in the season, about 10 games deep into the season, where he hadn't even thrown for more than 170 yards per contest. This is a team that is so predictable offensively, so run heavy, that you go ahead and load up the box. And if you're any good at stopping the run, you'll probably shut down Pittsburgh. The last 2 games of the season, Pittsburgh went up against incredibly strong defenses in their conference, Miami of Florida and Clemson. No thanks to the schedule maker to leave those last 2 for Pitt, but they did 0 on offense against those 2 teams. Miami shut them down totally, win 24-3. Clemson shuts them down totally, wins 42-10, because if Pittsburgh can't run the football, they can't move the football. And that's been the mantra, at least where I'm concerned, when I handicap this year for Pittsburgh and Maryland. If you can't run it, you can't move it, because neither one of those 2 teams can throw the football. So for Stanford, that's going to be the issue. And I don't know. Certainly they're not on the level this year of Miami of Florida or Clemson defensively. So I don't know that Stanford, even with 8 in the box, can shut Pittsburgh down, can stop Pittsburgh from running the football, can prevent offensive coordinator Sean Watson from just pounding the football here. To tell you, for those who don't know how run-heavy Pittsburgh was this year, play calling percentage-wise, 65% run, 35% pass. They don't want to throw the football if they don't have to. Now, all that being said, we're dealing with bowl games here, and if ever trick plays are going to come out, if ever differences in offensive philosophy are going to come out, maybe looking toward next year, maybe Pittsburgh goes through their practice sessions and thinks, 15 extra practices to work on our passing game for next year, and we'll see how it works in this bowl game. So there's always stuff in these bowl games that come out that we're not expecting. But to expect Pittsburgh to do that well, I don't know if I would in this game. I don't think Stanford's good enough to stop Pittsburgh from, totally shut them down from running the football. Other side of the coin, Stanford and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, their top wide receiver, could run wild against the Pitt defense here. So I'm kind of looking toward over in this one. Sun Bowl, again, is one of those venues where throughout the years we see weird weather. We see wind conditions at times that affect these games. We've seen cold weather that has affected these games. So without knowing the full weather report in advance, I won't get too crazy, but I think I might be looking at over in that contest.
Rob, we got Michigan State, Oregon up next in the Red Box Bowl. This one in Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California, 3 p.m. Eastern kick. Michigan State, Oregon, 48 the total, with the Ducks laying 2.5 across the board.
Yeah, well, let's start with this. Justin Herbert announces he's coming back to school yesterday, right? So that's a big plus for Oregon. I think the biggest fan of that certainly becomes Mario Cristobal, the head coach. Thank goodness you're coming back for next year. But interesting numbers on that Oregon offensive depth chart, which I was unaware of, is that in their 2 deep, there's only 2 seniors, a very, very young offensive football team. I mean, I knew they were young, but I didn't realize that those were the exact numbers, 2 seniors. So you've got 22 out of your 2 deep on the offensive side, or 20 of the 22 that'll be back. And this is great preparation for next year with Herbert at the controls. And if we just want to fundamentally match up Oregon's offense against Michigan State's defense, Drew, yes, Mario Cristobal tried to establish a more macho type mentality than we've seen out of Oregon before, and he did want to be run heavy, and I think prefers to be run heavy in their spread system. But in this case, when you're facing the number 1 rush defense in America, it really helps to be able to throw the football, because Michigan State's not that good at defending the pass, and we saw teams in the Big 12 this year throw the football on the Michigan State defense and have a lot of success. So Oregon being really diverse and having a lot of their offensive receiver injury problems fixed heading into this game, I think you could expect a lot of that here. Michigan State ranks 64th across the country in pass defense. I think it's something Oregon can exploit. And Brian Lewerke, obviously the quarterback for Michigan State, dealt with shoulder injuries all season long. It really hindered Michigan State's ability to throw the football. It was really L.J. Scott running or nothing. Their offense was horrendous. I don't know that gets corrected here. I think it's going to be a struggle for Michigan State offensively in this game. Pac-12 versus Big Ten, just from blanket statement, generalization, style of thinking, usually isn't the best matchup. Lately for the Pac-12 team, they can be steamrolled. It used to be in years past that their speed would go through the Big 12 rather easily. I think that's what happens here. I think Oregon's just too talented, and I think they'll be on a real high with Herbert coming back for this game. Defense is good enough, Drew, because Michigan State doesn't do any one thing real well. Michigan State last year had a great bowl game against the Pac-12 team. They really whacked Washington State. We talked about that earlier. I think Washington State was flat, but this opponent won't be flat, and Michigan State's just in a totally different spot than they were at this time last year. So I would look towards Oregon there.
All right, Robbie, we got the AutoZone Liberty Bowl up next, Missouri, Oklahoma State on ESPN, 3:45 Eastern kick, Monday, December 31st, New Year's Eve. This one in the Liberty Bowl in, what's that in?
It's in Memphis.
Memphis, yeah, that's it. So I had the Auburn, Purdue, and Missouri, Oklahoma State game mixed up from earlier. But either way, Missouri laying 9, 74.5 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, obviously with a kid just out of Mizzou, I pretty much know where the bowl game's going to be for that team this year. But they are in Memphis. And this, again, for those listening, I've said it a couple of times. I'll say it one more. There's a lot of these venues where weather – and more often than not plays havoc. So just check your Memphis weather. I think the last I saw, there was potential for light rain showers, which would be a blessing in Memphis. It wouldn't really destroy the football game, especially this particular matchup where you're dealing with two high-powered offenses. But there's been times where the field has been so muddy that nobody can establish anything on offense. We'll see how the weather goes. If we get a dry track here, Drew, I don't know how you play this thing any other way but over the total. Oklahoma State, first of all, I was extremely surprised, probably more shocked than any other game when I saw the opening number on this one, Missouri 9.5. And I thought to myself, how in the world is Mizzou 9.5 over Oklahoma State? My power ratings only showed them 2.5 on a neutral field over Oklahoma State. So I thought the line to start this was way, way, way out of whack. We'll see if it is or not. You do have SEC against Big 12 here, but again, SEC from the east side. Unlike Vanderbilt, the crossover games for Missouri were extremely tough this year. Missouri played Alabama, and obviously nobody has a lot of success with Alabama, so that's a tough matchup for them, and it kind of stalled them in the middle of the season. They did hold Alabama to only 39 points in that game. And then their other Western matchup was the so-called new rivalry with Arkansas. They don't have Kansas anymore, so they use Arkansas as a rival game. But it's going to be a sort of a spotlight type game for Drew Lock. Now that Herbert's not coming into the NFL draft, Drew Lock, Dwayne Haskins, to some extent, Kyler Murray, maybe if he decides not to play baseball and go into the NFL draft. But really, it's between Haskins and Locke as we speak for the number one quarterback selection overall. So for Locke, this will be a spotlight game. And boy, does he have a defense that he can pick apart here. And boy, does he have a receiving core, which there's some questionables in that receiving core. Make sure you check it out come game day, but I think they'll be healthy for the most part. If Alberto can go at tight end, it'll be even better for Mizzou. Very diverse offense, very difficult to cover, and the running game and the passing game. Oklahoma State won't do either. Missouri will score, and they'll score, and they'll score again. But Tyler Cornelius and that Oklahoma State offense, they take a big blow without Justice Hill, their top running back in this game. Justice Hill brings an awful lot to the table, and their starting right guard, Larry Williams, both of these guys, again, NFL draft prep, not going to play. It sets Oklahoma State back a bit, but I don't know that it sets them back tremendously. I think they'll score. I'm really hoping for dry weather here because I'll get involved with the over. You hate to have to wait, though, for the weather report, Drew, because as soon as that thing comes out, if it's going to be clear, we're not going to see 74 on this total anymore. It'll go up 76, 77, 78 because Oklahoma State, like Oklahoma, can make these numbers look small. So you almost have to do a little guesswork, a little pre-anticipation, and maybe get involved now. And if it doesn't work out your way, take back later. But I really don't see either way. These two offenses don't have their way with the other side.
Robbie, next game up, we got Northwestern versus Utah in the San Diego County Credit Union Holiday Bowl. This one in San Diego, California. It looks like 46 the total. Utah with Kyle Whittingham being the coach. What's his bowl record? Something like 11-1. Just it's something crazy like that. They're laying 7 or 7.5 here in San Diego, Robbie.
Yeah, boy, he is phenomenal in bowl games, Drew. And I would say that when you match him up against Pat Fitzgerald, who, and I don't have his bowl record in front of me right now, but just from a pure coaching standpoint, Pat Fitzgerald matches up very well in this game. You got two really, really good head coaches, two coaches that'll have their teams ready to play. It's an awful lot. We could almost take the breakdown of the Miami-Wisconsin game and just substitute it in here because it looks to be a defensive-oriented contest. Utah gets their hearts broken in the Pac-12 championship. I mean, I don't even think they allowed an offensive touchdown in that game. I think Washington's, if I'm remembering right, Washington's touchdown in that Pac-12 championship was a defensive interception return for a score. It was. Boy, they played tremendous in that game, and Northwestern's got their hands full with that Utah defense. Now, that being said, Pat Fitzgerald has a defense that's really good too, but the numbers, surprisingly to me, Drew, when I went and did the work, the numbers don't back it up so much. And so sometimes your eyes can be a little bit deceived by the true numbers, or sometimes the true numbers can be deceiving. But Northwestern, as we speak, defensively across the nation, they sit in the mid-60s, I think 63rd or 64th, as far as a total defense is concerned. So nowhere near what Utah is in this game. For Utah, you have to handicap in the fact that their top offensive weapon, Britton Covey, will not play in this game because of a knee injury suffered in that Washington game, and their offense was non-existent. And I know Washington's a great defense, but Utah just could not move the football. It's a kind of a prehistoric offense right now. They have suffered injuries at the quarterback position, the running back position, overcame both of those, and now the wide receiver position with Covey. I think it's going to be difficult. And Northwestern, if there's one thing we know about them, Drew, it's they play the top-level teams extremely tough. They might not play the bottom-level teams as tough, but, boy, when they get matched up against the top-level Big Ten, they usually come to play. And this year in particular, they came to play. Pat Fitzgerald turned it around once again after a slow start. Northwestern hit the gas and played very well down the stretch to get themselves a bowl bid and a spot in the Big Ten championship game. They were just overpowered by Ohio State. I think if you ask, well, I don't think, I know, if they were to tell you the truth and you asked Northwestern and Pat Fitzgerald how much better it will feel to be playing the Utah offense than the Ohio State offense, they're going to tell you this is a much bigger deal and a much better position for them to be in. The difference between those two offenses is like night and day. I would lean toward the points here with Northwestern. I think that somehow, some way, Clayton Thorson can find a couple of spots to score enough points to get in under the number. There's not going to be a lot of points scored in this game. Perhaps your best bet in this one is under the total. Probably be a lot of back and forth. Whittingham's bowl record is extremely difficult to bet against, but if you're going to give me Fitzgerald and that many points in a game where the opposing offense is not that capable, I think I'd be on Northwestern.
Robbie, next game up, we got NC State versus Texas A&M, ACC versus SEC here in the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville, Florida, 7:30 Eastern kick on ESPN. Looks like 57 the total with A&M laying 7 or 6.5. This is a good one to shop around because it's a key number here with Texas A&M. About a touchdown favorite, Robbie.
Yeah, and really incrementally, this number has shot up and up and up very slowly. Went from 4.5 to 5, 5 to 5.5, 5.5 to 6, 6 to 6.5, all the way to the point where we get to, like you say, there's 7s out there right now. And at 4.5, I went ahead and pulled the trigger on A&M personally and got in once NC State announced that they were going to be without leading wide receiver Kelvin Harmon obviously, I probably sold Ryan Finley short a minute ago, and I'll go back and correct myself because I said the number one quarterback off the board will be between Drew Lock and Dwayne Haskins. We have to throw Ryan Finley into that mix. Ryan Finley is another projected first-round guy who has a spotlight game here in the bowl season. Could have easily bagged this game and said, I'm going to go for NFL draft prep as well. Got ready for the combine, but he didn't, which makes this a real good opportunity for him to impress scouts. And the fact that A&M stinks on pass coverage had to be one of the reasons why Ryan Finley wants to play in this game, because he's got a real opportunity. The discrepancy between Texas A&M's run defense, which is number 2 in the country, and their pass defense, which was dead last in the SEC, are like night and day. So for North Carolina State, who started to balance things out toward the end of the year as far as run pass are concerned, and believe me, statistically, they're still really, really top heavy where their total yardage is concerned. Much more yardage obtained through passing than through running. But they were able, toward the end of the year, with Reggie Gillespie running the football, he became over a 1,000-yard rusher in their last game. Gillespie's efforts the last couple of weeks did balance off that NC State offense, and they were really rolling. They're not going to run the football against Texas A&M. Reggie Gillespie's not going to be able to run the football, but Ryan Finley, even without one of his best wide receiver, but they have 2 or 3 guys in there that can pick up the slack here. They'll throw it around a little bit. For Texas A&M, earlier we were talking about how these suspensions just keep coming out daily, or the subtractions of key personnel from teams come out daily. Texas A&M just had it happen to them within a day. Their number 1 linebacker, senior Otaro Alaka, not going to play in this game because of a wrist surgery. Jimbo Fisher held out hope, but he loses a guy who's got 45 career starts, is the key to that run defense, leads a team in tackles and tackles for loss, 79 and 14 and a half respectively. When you're not that good in pass coverage, and then you take a linebacker out who's going to be responsible for NC State and that kind of 3-level pass offense, they'll throw it to any level, short, intermediate, deep. It's troublesome. I don't know that it'll have a huge effect on their run defense, although it will have some. But especially against the pass, I think that causes trouble there for A&M. Not really willing to lay 7 points anymore with this team, the way this number has increased. I said before that I got in on the 4.5. That was a good number. But I'm more intrigued at this point in time now, Drew, by the total in this game, because I could see both of these teams putting up some points here. Jimbo Fisher's run offense is going to excel against NC State's defense, and Kellen Mond probably will find holes in that NC State secondary, which has been miserable this season. So keeping a close eye on the total in that one. Hasn't really budged. I think we were looking at 58 or 58.5, which may be in some places. In fact, I'm looking right now, we're looking at a number of 57 at this point. So, to me, that game up and over the number could be a real consideration there. It's being played again New Year's Day, the 30th of December, but in Jacksonville, Florida is the point. So check the weather. Gator Bowls. I think last year's Gator Bowl might have been ruined by rain, but it's just one of those sites where you have to be cognizant of what the weather is.
Yeah, I think it was. And guys, we're on to the last day now. And remember the coupon code for the podcast, CBB499 at checkout for Robbie Vino's rest of college basketball season. And with that, we'll throw in the rest of the bowl season here. He obviously knows his stuff. He's a great choice. And that coupon code will work with any handicapper on the sportsmemo.com website. CBB499, rest of the college basketball season. And we throw in the rest of the bowl season on the house. Last day here, Robbie, and I believe the longest podcast we can have is an hour and a half, so we got 19 minutes to finish it, 5 games, but we'll get after it. And guys, also, Rob is doing this just off the cusp. I asked him to do to just keep going from 245, 246 Arkansas, Nevada, all the way through the end of the card to get all these games in, so everybody could could listen to the breakdowns before they could go off on Tuesday, January 1st. So hats off to you, Robbie, for just being able to kind of rattle off the top of your head, man. That's pretty awesome.
I appreciate that, Drew. Yeah, we are going a little off the cuff, and we'll try and speed it up here to get every game in. Could go a little deeper, and these games, as they approach, you get a little more information. So, like I say, very, very general podcast here, but hopefully it's helping everybody listening.
Yeah, for sure. And starting off New Year's Day here, Tuesday, 269-270 Iowa, Mississippi State. Looks like the Bulldogs from the SEC laying 7-43 the total. This SEC versus Big Ten with the Iowa Hawkeyes versus the Mississippi State Bulldogs in Raymond James Stadium, Tampa, Florida, 12 noon Eastern on ESPN2. Robbie, how do you look to bet Iowa, Mississippi State?
Yeah, it's going to be difficult for Iowa offensively, Drew, because this Mississippi State defense, for as much credit as Alabama gets defensively, as LSU gets defensively, as Auburn gets defensively, Georgia, all the other SEC teams that people talk about a lot more, this Mississippi defense, not to SEC insiders, but to others across the nation, it just goes unnoticed. The names aren't household names. We don't see Mississippi State as much in prime time. This defense is phenomenal, and it could be argued that overall it's been the best defense in the SEC this year. Right now, Mississippi State number 6 in team pass defense, number 10 in team run defense, 2 top 10 units, both pass and run, against an Iowa team which has been real good this season, and certainly Kirk Ferentz has done a great coaching job with this team. And they've sort of brought Iowa out of the caveman age where offense is concerned, Drew. I'm not going to say that they're totally out of it, but Nate Stanley, having him at quarterback, another kid who is likely to be in this NFL draft and highly considered, so another guy who's got a spotlight chance. But boy, he's got it a lot rougher than some of the other guys we talked about. For Drew Lock to play against Oklahoma State, not that rough. For Dwayne Haskins, could be a little bit rough. For Ryan Finley against the A&M pass defense, not that rough. For this quarterback, Nate Stanley, against this defense, it's going to be tough because you can't establish anything against Mississippi State. You can't establish a run to set up the pass. I don't know how Iowa's going to go about this. I really don't. Their defense is going to have to hang in to this game as long as they can and hope that maybe Mississippi State quarterback Nick Fitzgerald reverts back to the guy who turns the football over quite a bit. Nick Fitzgerald was really good down the stretch, and that's there's a direct correlation between Mississippi State's results late in the season and the play of Nick Fitzgerald, because the defense has been the constant. I don't know, Drew, that I'm going to have any problem in playing the SEC side in this game, just because I think Stanley's going to be under immense pressure. I think their ground game is going to be stalled, and I'm really having a difficult time. I'm still going through the game, but I'm having a difficult time figuring out how the Ferentz guys are going to, as offensive coordinator and head coach, put together a game plan that can dent this Mississippi State defense. They have shut down some really, really good offenses this year. So for me right now, the price is still at a range where we could go ahead and play MSU. Joe Moorhead got off to a little bit of a rough start, but remember, this is his first year and he's got his team in a bowl game right away. He got blessed with really good talent. The cupboard was full when he got there, but he found a way to get this team not only to play good defense, which they already had, but he's found a way to help Nick Fitzgerald get a little bit better and have that offense ring up some points lately.
Robbie, my favorite bowl game is up next, 1 p.m. Eastern kick on January 1st on ESPN. PlayStation Fiesta Bowl from Glendale, Arizona. LSU laying 7.5 against the UCF Knights. 55 the total, Robbie.
Yeah, for LSU, Drew, they carry a burden on their shoulder into this one. They really, really do, because off of what UCF did last year against Auburn in the bowl game, off of what UCF has continued to do even without Mackenzie Milton, that is go 26-0 now and looking for 27 here, potentially 2 undefeated seasons. But they carry a lot of pressure on their shoulders for the SEC. For the SEC to lose this bowl game straight up for the second year in a row, I don't want to slight UCF, but SEC followers would consider it an embarrassment. UCF obviously is a talented team. That comeback against Memphis was amazing. I mean, their defense was non-existent, but the fact that they were down 34-3 or 35-7, whatever it was, and came all the way back to win, not just win, but win going away with their backup quarterback was really amazing. LSU has had, a few people on the defensive side listed as out for this game. None more important than Greedy Williams. In fact, that defensive secondary is really depleted right now as far as starters are concerned. So UCF may find some ways to make yardage through the air. Josh Heupel, if I'm not mistaken, Drew, and I'd have to go back and look it up. I haven't gotten that far in preparation for this game yet, but I do believe that Josh Heupel, as offensive coordinator for Missouri, went to LSU last year and played them, got destroyed in that game, but probably a lot of lessons learned by Josh Heupel about that defensive personnel and what Ed Ogeron likes to do down there defensively. So I think that he could come back a little better prepared this time around. The fan favorite thing is for UCF to go ahead and win this thing and be the Disney type ending. I don't know that it's going to happen, but I also know for sure that LSU isn't going to enter this game flat the way Auburn did last year. LSU, like I say, with a little bit of pressure on them, will come to play. But the secondary bothers me. It really does. Without Fulton, without Williams and these guys, it bothers me. I think UCF has the talent and the system and the speed that they play at. Let's face it, LSU really doesn't face a lot of opponents who play at that type of warp speed. And with that type of precision. I mean, a lot of teams play fast, but UCF has precision and so well balanced. Right now, I might lean towards the UCF side, but I'm still looking deeper into that game.
Robbie, we got the Citrus Bowl up next, 1 p.m. Eastern kick on ABC from Orlando, Florida. Kentucky versus Penn State, 47.5 the total. Nittany Lions laying 6.5.
Yeah, I think, it'll be presented as, and it could be broken down as, Benny Snell on one side against Trace McSorley on the other side. And maybe that's what it boils down to here, Drew. It's very possible that, whether or not Trace McSorley can crack the Kentucky defense with Josh Allen, who's been an absolute stud all season long, or whether or not Benny Snell can run against what is the strength of the Penn State defensive unit, and that's their run defense. So it could be as simple as that here in this case. I just happen to think that Penn State's got, they're not the offense that they were last year, but they just have so many more ways that they can move the football. Kentucky is so limited in what they can do. They're so sporadic in the passing game. And Penn State's coming in here with a ton of time to prepare and looking specifically at stacking the box and stopping Benny Snell. And if they're successful at that, and we're going to go ahead and put the game on quarterback Terry Wilson's shoulders, that's tough. That's tough. I mean, if you get really good, consistent results, I'd be surprised. You can get good play, couple bad plays, good play, 3 bad plays. It's hard to bank on stuff like that. You'd have to bank on the Kentucky defense coming to play here and shutting McSorley down. But to me, he's too good. I'd probably look at Penn State in this game. Motivation is going to be a factor. Kentucky, extremely excited. Penn State, I'm not so sure. So still considering that angle of this handicap, because for Penn State to draw Kentucky, who hasn't been in a bowl game in a long time, or they don't generally go to bowl games, that's not the SEC opponent that Penn State really wants to go and play.
Robbie, we got the Rose Bowl up next, 5 p.m. Eastern kick on ESPN from Pasadena, California. Washington versus Ohio State. The Buckeyes laying 6.5, 57 the total.
Yeah, well, you know what? This thing, amazingly, Drew, I shouldn't even say amazingly, I think predictably, this point spread did a major turnaround when Urban Meyer announced it was going to be his last game. I think, and I have to go back to look at and track how the money moved and how much it moved, or how much the point spread moved. But I know for a fact that Washington took early money in this game. And then Urban Meyer came out and said what he said, that it's going to be his last game as head coach of Ohio State. And it zoomed up to where we are now at 6.5 and has really sat there. So I think a lot of people playing the motivational angle here for Ohio State, their head coach on the way out. We've seen this angle work both ways. Just look at yesterday. Paul Johnson, 11 years at Georgia Tech, and they got slammed by Minnesota. P.J. Fleck brought his team in there and just physically dominated. So just because a head coach has announced it's his last game, it doesn't necessarily mean that the team's going to win and cover a number. For Ohio State, though, I think that's a lot of the reason why there's been support here. Obviously, their offense is so dynamic, but the key matchup here, and again, Dwayne Haskins, one of those quarterbacks that the NFL is looking at as a first-round draft pick and maybe first off the board. Dwayne Haskins is not going to have it easy here. That Washington secondary is difficult to throw against, extremely difficult to throw against. And if you don't think Washington is sick of hearing about Dwayne Haskins and sick of hearing about Ohio State offense and sick of hearing about Urban Meyer get all this attention because he's going out, then Chris Peterson's not doing his job. And I know Chris Peterson's doing his job. So in this game, for me, as this price has climbed up, I kind of like the Washington side here. I think defensively, they've got – when I compare them to Big Ten defenses that Ohio State's faced this year, I think Washington's better than any of them. And it would maybe the exception of Michigan, but they're right on that level. And we'll have to see, Drew. I guess the tipping point for me will be if I come to the conclusion that Washington can move the football successfully enough against the Ohio State defense, which has done a drastic turnaround from being easily run over and easily scored upon to being pretty tough the last couple of games of the season. So I don't think Ohio State's really made that turn defensively, so maybe I'll get there with Washington plus points.
Robbie, last game up, and guys, remember the coupon code at checkout, CBB499, rest of the college basketball season for just $499, and we throw in the rest of bowl season with that on the house. CBB499 at checkout. Sugar Bowl, Robbie, last game up, 8:45 Eastern on ESPN from New Orleans. The Big Easy, Texas versus Georgia, 58 the total. Looks like the Bulldogs, UGA, laying 13.
Yeah, and you made reference to it earlier, Drew, the number of Tom Herman as a coach throughout his career as an underdog. It's phenomenal. I think 21-2, if I've got the number right, 21-2 against the spread as an underdog for all the stops that he's been at throughout his career. But after I get through that, I think, what else? Where else is Texas got an advantage over Georgia? And those things are hard to find. I think I'm going to go back to last year's game real quick here because this is just how I went about my handicapping. And I thought that Georgia probably learned a real lesson last year against Baker Mayfield and the Oklahoma Sooners' Big 12 style offense, dual threat quarterback, extremely accurate quarterback that sliced them up. And now they're going to come back and they're going to play another Big 12 offense with a dual-threat quarterback in Sam Ehlinger, nowhere near the weapons that Oklahoma had, and Sam Ehlinger nowhere near the accurate passer that Baker Mayfield was. So I think there'll be a defense, specifically what Georgia did toward the end of the third quarter, through the fourth quarter, and into overtime to get them over the hump to win that game last year. I think that's what they'll employ here against a Texas team that's far less talented offensively than Oklahoma was last year, especially at the quarterback position. And certainly at some of the skill spots. This number's climbing for a reason, and I can't figure out any reason to buck this move from 10.5 up to 12.5. To me, Georgia is the far superior team. If you're of the belief that Georgia is mad because they're left out of the CFB Final Four playoff here, and that they're going to come in motivationally on a high, then you really have to like Georgia. The Tom Herman record is nice, but I don't know, Drew. Past that, I can't get to any reason why I would want to play Texas.
Robbie, great breakdown through the whole card. Bunch of bowl games, 40-plus bowl games. Hats off to you, Robbie. Follow him on Twitter at RobVinoSports, and the coupon code 499, CBB499 at checkout will give you the rest of his college basketball season, and we throw in the rest of the bowls on the house. For Rob Vino, I'm Drew Martin. Guys, we'll be back on Friday with the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast.
Only 4 days to go to get your millionaire raffle ticket before they're gone. With 1 millionaire guaranteed, over 5,500 cash prizes, and our best win odds ever, you can win it. Even your karate instructor can win it. Play responsibly in store, in-app, or at lottery.ie. I'm a millionaire. Only 4 days to go to get your millionaire raffle ticket before they're gone. With 1 millionaire guaranteed, over 5,500 cash prizes, and our best win odds ever, you can win it. Even your karate instructor can win it. Play responsibly in store, in-app, or at lottery.ie.
I'm a millionaire.